I don't think Pete really needs much of an introduction. He's very much a legend in the sport for all of those fellow camp drafters. So I just wanted to welcome Pete today. He's a 20-time ACA champion rider. He's won drafts all over Queensland and all over Australia several times. Pete, there's way too many successes to highlight. Can you just tell us what is your biggest highlight? Like, out of all of this, like looking at some of these photos, some of these memories, I'm sure they'd be bringing back some really good times that you've had. Tell us some of your biggest highlights that you've had in your career.
Oh, well, I think, over a long period of time, I was very lucky, very fortunate. I started camp drafting early. So, whether it was a juvenile, back at Winton in 1986 or, a Wallinga Park win in 2019, there's, there's so many special events. I mean, everyone wants to win a Warwick Gold Cup. I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to, to win most of those big events and, to be part of them anyway for a long period. I suppose the luckiest thing, in my career is, being pretty injury free, so that's, that's been really good. We've had a long, association with people, which has made it very special as well. I think camp drafting, to me, as a sportsman, fantastic, but the people have been as well, so I've been very lucky. I started drafting probably at Foxley in 1978. I probably had my first camp draft run, and, still to be in 2020. Well, we're not doing too much camp drafting in the moment, but, to be still at my age, to be on some days you can be at the top of your career still. So no, it's been a very special time right through, really.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's just have a really quick look at you in action and some of your clinics. Hopefully this will work.
This is a fair while ago since I was in all this. Anyway, yeah, things have changed.
Those jeans, is that what you're talking about?
There's a few things changed in the jean size as one, yeah. Colour of the hair changed as well, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think pretty much none of this has changed at all. I think the basic stop, turn around, go with the beast, all that sort of stuff, the enthusiasm, I suppose, the most important thing, is to be able to get out and ride every day, I think that's the most important thing. Advice from, someone that's starting out or, going to get into it. I think the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. I suppose that's the most important thing, Harley, is, to become a winner and everything like that. I think there's no substitute for hard work, really. So, the hard work comes in the relationship with the horse. So, the more you ride the horse and more time and more feed, the more, the more you put into your horse. So, the luckier I think you'll become.
Yeah, so bringing it back to basics, and for those of us that don't really know much about camp drafting, could you break it down for us and explain exactly what it is? We did have a question from Catherine who pretty much asked for a breakdown of the discipline as she's starting the sport, and would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, long story short, I suppose camp drafting originated from cattle properties where they bought the fat cattle in and they breeding stock and they cut the fat cattle out and that sort of stuff. So it become, showing the abilities of a horse to be able to, to select those stock and hold them out on their own. And then that became, with people saying, I've got a better horse than you. So then, it become a little bit of a competition. So then they constructed yards and that sort of stuff. So, moving forward really quickly, then of course the sport as it is today is cattle are brought into an area, like into a town, mainly truck today. In the past they've been driven a lot, but there's hell of a lot of trucking goes on today. They get put into a cutout yard, which is I guess some semi-tennis court, I guess, area. There's sort of 8 or 10 head of cattle put into that yard. You get your horse trained to stop and turn around. As the judge says, right, you bring one beast out of that mob up, and there's a obviously, without going into too much detail, there's a set of rules that go with it, obviously, but you've got to show the ability to hold your beast, out from the other cattle, and show the ability and agility of your horse to turn around and go with the beast. And it's all judged in 2 or 3 turns, and then you go out into a big cricket field, I suppose you'd call the cricket, like into the same area where you play cricket, I suppose, and there's a course set up there. So there's some 40 metres, in between the 2 pegs. There's what they call 2 pegs, and then there's a gate out the back, sort of thing, So there's some 40 seconds to complete this course, and so it's not only showing the ability to cut the beast out, but then you've got to chase the beast in a cloverleaf pattern to the right, and then to the left, and to the right again, or so on, to the left and then to the right. And, there's judges, it's judged and scored accordingly, and so on and so on. But long story short, that's about what goes on in camp drafting. It's not much fun to watch, I suppose. But it's very addictive, and like any horse sport, I suppose. Once you get a horse and then you start to feed the horse, I suppose that's where the Pryde people come into it. But the riding and it's very, very addictive, and we find that I suppose 70% of new people are coming in are females too. They've got a love for a horse, and very, very passionate about what they do with the horses and wanting to learn so much. So it's a sport that's growing from strength to strength. If that makes sense. Yeah,
that was a great explanation. You answered a few of my questions there, Pete. So then I guess, what would define someone who places from someone who doesn't in the sport? What's that defining factor?
Someone that places that someone doesn't. So the one good thing, I suppose, and the reason why camp drafting is growing so much money is because there's not really, it's judged on competition. So, for an example, on a weekend, we go away and there's an encouragement camp draft, there's a maiden camp draft, a novice camp draft, an open camp draft, and then you have a ladies, a juvenile, and a junior. And the difference, I suppose, to camp drafting to anything else that makes it so unique is because people aren't really judged on where they're at and how they're going with it, and so on and so on. I mean, people go to clinics and that sort of stuff to learn and that sort of stuff, but at the bar that night, it's how did your horse go is the most important thing. So people, it's lovely to be competitive and everything like that. And there's not one person goes to camp draft that doesn't think that one day I'm going to be sitting out there at the front with all these blue ribbons around the neck. That's the most important and the goal that everyone sets to go. But the biggest thing in camp drafting and the reason why it's growing so much is because of the knowledge that's shared, I suppose. You have a beer at that night and they'll say, oh, I'm having a little bit of trouble with this or that or whatever, and knowledge is given so much easier than any other sport. And that's why it's probably the most popular. The sport is growing and growing and growing because we're all at one level, I suppose. When you go to a camp draft, you pay your nomination, you go in there and the horses are at a different level, So if you're riding a maiden competition, he's a maiden horse, and he's got to win a maiden to become a novice horse. He's got to win 4 novices to become an open horse. So, that's where you see the levels obviously change, through the horses in the competition. But as far as the people go, we find that's why it's growing so much, because you can be just coming for a weekend or for station somewhere, and you can be standing next door to a guy that's won, many titles or, wins a camp draft every week. I mean, people just socialise, Matty. So that's what makes it such a special event, I suppose.